My dad moved on with my mom's sister weeks after her death, then tried to kick me out. Now he regrets everything. This is probably going to be long and messy, but I really need to get it off my chest. So much has happened over the past few months, and I honestly don't know if I'm doing the right thing anymore. I just feel incredibly alone. I'm 17, and I live with my dad. My mom passed away less than a year ago. She had been battling cancer for what felt like forever since I was around 13. She was constantly in and out of the hospital. Those years were rough. Our whole family went through it, but it hit us hard, especially because my dad was the only one working. That meant I had to step in and take care of Mom. I became her main caregiver. Sometimes, her sister, my Aunt Edna, who's 38, would drop by and help, but most of the time, it was just me and Mom. I did everything I could to take care of her. And honestly, if I had to do it all over again, I would, no questions asked. I miss her so much. It's this constant ache. Even now, all these months later, not a day goes by where I don't talk to her before bed. I tell her about my day, just like I used to. I can't let her go. It feels like the world moved on and left her behind, like she never existed. But not me. I still hold on. I always will. The same can't be said for my dad, though. I don't know what happened to him, but he changed fast. It didn't take long after Mom died for him to just move on. He took down every photo of her. He doesn't bring her up. There's not a single thing left in the house that reminds you of her. And that's the part that's hard for me to understand, because growing up, I watched them love each other deeply. It was always the three of us, and our home used to be full of love and laughter. But once Mom got sick, it felt like all of that disappeared. Toward the end, Dad became short-tempered and distant. I hate admitting this, but sometimes it felt like he was just waiting for her to die. He'd stay longer at work and seemed to avoid being home with her. Watching that unfold was brutal. Thankfully, Mom was too exhausted most days to realize how checked out he had become. I tried to step in and be the support she needed, but I know I couldn't replace what she really wanted, her husband beside her. Then came the part that completely shattered me. Just a few weeks after Mom passed, my dad started dating Aunt Edna. Yeah, her own sister. I've never felt so hurt or betrayed in my life. I probably never will again. How could he move on from a 20-year marriage that quickly? And not just with anyone, but with her sister? It was disgusting. Dad told me I wouldn't understand now, but maybe one day I would. For now, he said, I just needed to respect his choice. I told him straight up that I hated him for it. I said I would never respect something so twisted. I asked him how it was so easy for him to forget the woman he spent 2 decades with. He had no answer. We got into a huge fight. I called him every terrible name I could think of. And all he said back was that someday I'd understand. I told him he was a disgusting excuse for a man, and I hoped I'd never turn out like him. I know those words hurt him. Honestly? I wanted them to. I needed him to feel the kind of pain I was drowning in. The pain I knew Mom would have felt too if she saw what he was doing just months after she died. It was vile. And somehow, everyone started acting like I was the problem. Like I was the bad guy for not being okay with their little love story. Even Aunt Edna tried to sit me down and talk, telling me I should be happy for them and that this could help me move on. I wanted to slap her right then and there. I told her this wasn't some silly breakup I needed to get over, this was my mother. She was talking like Mom was some chapter that could just be closed. I made it very clear, just because she'd taken Mom's place in my dad's life didn't mean she could do the same in mine. She tried to say she didn't want to replace anyone, just start a new family. I told her I didn't want a new family. My family was Mom and Dad. And if he chose to throw that all away for her so soon, then I didn't want to be part of his new life. They both tried to talk me into accepting it, over and over again. I shut them out every single time. Eventually, I just locked myself in my room unless I had to eat or go to school. I didn't want anything to do with either of them. And my dad, after trying a few times, eventually gave up. He just stopped trying to talk to me altogether. The house turned cold. We stopped speaking. It was like we were strangers living under the same roof. The tension was thick, it was toxic. I think he was just waiting for me to cave, hoping he could guilt or push me into giving in. But I stood my ground. I couldn't accept something so wrong. I thought things couldn't possibly get worse. But I was wrong. About a month and a half ago, Aunt Edna, Dad's girlfriend now, moved in. We hadn't made peace, hadn't even come close. I wasn't given a warning, not even a heads up. I woke up one morning to the sound of boxes being dragged around and suitcases clunking. I came out of my room and there she was, Aunt Edna, moving in like it was the most normal thing in the world. I asked her what was going on. She didn't answer, just marched into her new room. I went straight to Dad, trying to figure out what the hell was happening. And all he said was, "Oh, so now you talk to me?" I wanted to punch him. I really did. I already knew what was happening, I just didn't want to believe it. That woman hadn't just taken my mom's place in his heart, she wanted her home too. Every moment I spent in that house after she moved in felt like I was being choked. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't stand being around them. I quietly moved all of Mom's things into my room, the stuff I could salvage. That was the only place I felt close to her. I knew the minute Aunt Edna got a chance, she'd toss everything out. She asked Dad a few times where Mom's things were, and every time, he told her I had them. Aunt Edna's tried to get into my room more times than I can count, always with some excuse or another. But I won't let her in. I can't stand the thought of her being in the same space where my mom's things are. It makes my skin crawl. Even when I head out for school, I make sure to lock my door behind me, there's no way I'm letting her touch anything in there. That room is all I have left that feels like Mom. Things took another turn about 2 weeks ago when Aunt Edna's daughter, Rachel, moved in. Rachel's 19. We used to be pretty close when we were younger, being around the same age helped. Back then, she felt more like a real sister to me than a cousin. But once Mom got sick, I was always taking care of her, and Rachel and I just kind of drifted apart. We stayed in touch here and there, but it was never the same. So when Rachel showed up at the house, I was honestly kind of happy to see her. I thought maybe, finally, I'd have someone to talk to. But my dad hit me with something that left me speechless. He said the house didn't have enough space for 4 people, and that I'd need to go stay with a friend for a few days until they figured something out. I stared at him in disbelief. If there wasn't enough room, then why did he even invite Rachel to stay? He told me Rachel was having a tough time and that as family, we needed to help her. I reminded him that I was his family too, just like Mom was. But that didn't seem to matter to him. The minute Aunt Edna showed up in his life, it was like Mom and I stopped existing. He didn't have a response to that, just told me I needed to stop being difficult and start compromising, or he'd be forced to take action. At this point, nothing shocks me anymore when it comes to him. He's sunk so low, I've stopped expecting decency. I wasn't even that worried about myself. I had a couple friends who would have taken me in for a while. What tore me up inside was leaving Mom's things behind. I knew if I left, Aunt Edna would waste no time messing with them, and I wouldn't be there to stop her. And my dad? He wouldn't lift a finger to protect her memory. I was sick with anxiety. So, I stayed. I went back into my room and locked the door. A few hours later, Aunt Edna came knocking, said she just wanted to talk. I ignored her. I stayed holed up in there all day, spiraling deeper into panic. I couldn't stop thinking about what might happen to the only things I had left of Mom. The next morning, I got up early and locked my room tight before heading downstairs to grab a bite. To my surprise, Dad was there, asleep on the couch, like he'd been waiting for me. As soon as he heard me, he stood up and said he wanted to talk. I told him I wasn't interested. I tried to grab some food and make a quick escape back upstairs, but he blocked my path. I tried to squeeze past him, but he wouldn't budge. Then he just laid it all out. He told me I had 1 week to move out. He said they couldn't accommodate me anymore. He looked me dead in the eye and said he was choosing Rachel over me because I was, in his words, an ungrateful, insufferable brat who didn't appreciate anything he was doing. So, he said he'd stop. The only thing he'd do from now on, out of the so-called kindness of his heart, was send me some money for expenses. But otherwise, I had to go. I needed to make space for his new family. I just stood there, tears falling down my face, looking at a man I didn't even recognize anymore. I used to think I'd only lost one parent. That morning, I realized I'd lost both. My dad didn't see me as his son anymore. I was just a burden to him, something he could toss aside when it got inconvenient. And the worst part? He could. This was his house. He was the one paying the bills, feeding me. He didn't owe me anything. Legally or otherwise, he could cut me off the second I turned 18. And that birthday was coming up fast. Meanwhile, he had no issue letting Rachel, who's already 19, move in like it was no big deal. I realized then that this wasn't just unfair. It was cruel. It was favoritism. It was pure hypocrisy. I started to wonder if maybe he'd always been this selfish, and I just hadn't seen it until life got hard and the masks came off. I didn't argue. I just turned around, went back to my room, and cried harder than I had in months. I was being abandoned by the only parent I had left. And even though things between us had been cold for a while, deep down I'd held onto the stupid hope that we might eventually find our way back to being father and son. But that hope died right then and there. He didn't love me. He didn't care what happened to me. As long as he had Aunt Edna by his side, nothing else mattered. I had no idea where I'd go. And I wasn't even worried about myself, not really. I could live out of a backpack if I had to. I was already planning to only keep 2 pairs of clothes. But Mom's things? I couldn't part with a single item. Her stuff is all I have left of her. I'll never let that go. A few hours later, I heard a knock on my door again. I didn't want to answer. But then I heard Rachel's voice. She said she wanted to help, and that I should talk to my grandfather, Mom's dad, as soon as possible. Then she slid a letter under the door. I didn't know what to think. I didn't really trust her. I mean, she'd always been a good person, and part of me wanted to believe her. But it had been years since we'd really been close. And at the end of the day, she was still her mother's daughter. Her loyalty would always lie with Aunt Edna. So yeah, I was cautious. But I also had no options left. Things couldn't really get worse than they already were. So, I called my grandpa. He lives in a different state. The second I heard his voice, I broke down. I was crying so hard I could barely get the words out. He asked me what was wrong, and somehow, between all the sobbing, I managed to explain everything that had happened. It took me a while to get through it all, and I made sure to tell him that Rachel had been the one who told me to reach out. Grandpa was so happy to hear from me. He told me he'd been asking my dad to have me call him for months now, but Dad kept saying I didn't want to talk. Grandpa had been meaning to call me himself, but he'd lost his phone a while back along with all his contacts, and Dad never gave him my number. He said I didn't need to worry about anything anymore. He promised he'd handle everything and that he'd be flying down to my city as soon as he could. But he also warned me to keep all of this quiet. No one could know he was coming. He said he'd stay in touch and give me updates, but until he arrived, I needed to stay put. I couldn't move out of the house under any circumstances. He asked me to keep my door locked at all times and not let Mom's things out of my sight. That phone call left me feeling a mix of emotions. On one hand, I felt this huge wave of relief. It was the first time in a long while that an adult actually made me feel safe. I've had to grow up way too fast, and just for a moment, I got to feel like a kid again, like someone had my back. But I was scared, too. Things suddenly felt serious, like this wasn't just family drama anymore. Grandpa's always been cheerful and lighthearted, even after losing his daughter. But now, I could tell he meant business. And I wasn't sure if he'd really be able to stand up to his other daughter, Aunt Edna. Right now, it all feels like a complete mess. And the only thing I can do is wait. I just have to hold on until he shows up and pulls me out of this nightmare. Update 1. Everything's changed, and now, it all finally makes sense. For so long I couldn't figure out why my dad was acting the way he was. But now that Grandpa is here and starting to sort things out, the truth is finally coming to light. Grandpa arrived a week ago. He messaged me and asked me to meet him at the hotel where he was staying. He told me to bring all of Mom's things with me and said he'd send a car. So I packed everything up, my stuff and Mom's, and told Dad and Aunt Edna I was leaving. Rachel wasn't home at the time, she was at work. When I got to Grandpa's hotel room, he started digging through the boxes, like he was searching for something. And then he found it, an old document. But not just any piece of paper. It was the deed to the house we've been living in my whole life. That's when Grandpa sat me down and explained everything. Turns out, when Rachel and I were born, Grandpa, who, by the way, is way wealthier than I ever realized, bought us each a house. Yeah, I know. It sounds insane, but that's what he did instead of setting up college funds. He gifted us property. The house I've grown up in is actually mine, legally speaking. The only catch? Since Rachel and I were both minors, the houses were managed by our moms until we turned 18. I had no idea about any of this. Mom never told me, and honestly, I don't blame her. She was so sick for so long, and she probably just forgot. But my dad? That's a different story. He knew and said nothing. Rachel's house had already been transferred to her name last year, not long after her 18th birthday. That's the house Aunt Edna and Rachel had been living in until recently. But here's where things get shady, because Mom died before I turned 18, the rights to manage my house should have gone to my legal guardian. Everyone assumed that meant Dad. But Grandpa believes Dad and Aunt Edna have been working together to either get the house signed over to themselves or steal the paperwork before I hit 18 so they could claim ownership. That's why Dad never brought any of this up. That's why they kept trying to get into my room. That's why Aunt Edna suddenly moved in. It was all a setup. I asked Grandpa what happened with Rachel's house, and he told me something I wasn't expecting. Apparently, the second Rachel found out what her mother was up to, she kicked Aunt Edna out. It caused a huge fallout between the two of them, and they haven't gotten along for years. That honestly surprised me, because if that's true, why had Rachel come to live with us? Grandpa explained that Rachel was worried about me. She was especially freaked out when she found out her mom was moving in with my dad. She had been keeping in close contact with Grandpa the whole time, and together, they decided I needed to know the truth and get out of that situation. That's why Rachel came back, so she could look out for me from the inside, without raising suspicion. Aunt Edna thought Rachel was trying to patch things up, but in reality, she was on my side. I asked Grandpa what we could do now, since I'm still a couple months away from turning 18. That's when he dropped another bombshell. Mom had actually started getting suspicious before she passed. She didn't have solid proof, but she had a strong feeling Dad was trying to take the house and that he might even be having an affair. She didn't know with who, but looking back, I think it was Aunt Edna all along. Mom ended up calling Grandpa while she was still alive and asked him to change the legal guardianship on the house. Without Dad knowing, she had the documents updated so that Grandpa, not my father, was listed as my guardian and caretaker of the property until I turned 18. That's the document Grandpa was looking for. And that's the one Dad never knew existed. So now, Dad has zero legal authority over the house. Grandpa is the legal caretaker, and that changes everything. He told me that since he's officially in charge of the house, he's planning to move in and stay with me until my 18th birthday. And once he's there, he's going to throw Dad and Aunt Edna out. Just like that. When he said it, I felt this chill run down my spine. I couldn't believe I suddenly had this kind of power over the man who's been making my life hell. My father. And honestly, I have no idea what to even do with all this. I mean, I'm still just a kid who lost his mom and got caught in the middle of this twisted mess of a family. I don't want to deal with legal battles or anything like that. It's too much. So I told Grandpa I'm handing the reins over to him. Whatever he says, I'll follow. I'm too worn down to keep fighting. I just want a little peace in my life for once. I told him I'd do whatever he asked, and he promised me not to worry about anything. He said he had it all covered. God, I hope he's right. Because I honestly don't think I have the strength left to handle more drama or hurt. I feel completely shattered. I just want out. Update 2. Things escalated fast. Grandpa and I confronted Dad and Aunt Edna. The second they saw us walk in together, they both went pale like ghosts. Grandpa didn't hesitate for a second, he just strolled right into the house like he owned the place. Dad tried to push back, but Grandpa shut him down before he could get more than a few words out. And then I saw him. Grandpa had brought a lawyer with him. You could see the panic set in on both Dad and Aunt Edna's faces. Without wasting any time, Grandpa told Dad point-blank that he was the legal guardian of the property until I turned 18. And since he had every right to live there, he was officially giving my dad 1 month to pack up and leave. That's when Dad lost it. He jumped up and started yelling, claiming Grandpa had no legal authority. They went back and forth, trading some very ugly words. But Grandpa? He stayed calm. Just reached into his briefcase and pulled out a copy of the updated guardianship papers, signed and notarized, the ones Mom had changed before she passed. The look on Dad's face was priceless. His jaw literally dropped. He stammered something about how the papers were fake, that it was all forged, but Grandpa calmly explained that Mom had every right to make those changes. She was still alive and sound of mind when she did it. Dad didn't have a leg to stand on, and neither did Aunt Edna. You could tell neither of them saw this coming. Meanwhile, Rachel was standing off to the side, quietly watching it all unfold. And then she started laughing. It wasn't mean, it was just genuine. Like she'd been waiting a long time for justice. She came over, wrapped her arms around me, and gave me a hug. I hugged her right back and told her how much it meant to me, everything she had done, all the ways she'd looked out for me. But Aunt Edna saw that hug and realized Rachel had betrayed her. She flipped. She grabbed Rachel's arm and slapped her hard. Left a cut on her cheek. Rachel didn't even flinch. She just stood there grinning and calmly said, "I'm pressing charges." Aunt Edna collapsed into a heap on the floor, crying and begging. "You're my daughter, how could you do this to me?" But you could see it in Rachel's eyes, she was done. Done with the lies, the manipulation, and the abuse. She wasn't going to let Aunt Edna walk away from this. My dad, seeing everything fall apart around him, suddenly tried to change gears. He asked to talk to me privately, like he wanted to smooth things over. But Grandpa stepped in and said, "There's nothing left to talk about. You made your choice." Dad tried to argue, saying this was between a father and son, and that Grandpa had no right to get involved. I looked him in the eye and said, "Grandpa does have every right. And even if he didn't, I still wouldn't want to talk to you." And then everything I'd been holding in came pouring out. I told my dad exactly what I thought of him. I told him he failed. As a husband, as a father, and as a man. I reminded him that he had every chance to make things right after Mom died. He could have brought us together, helped us heal, but he chose selfishness, greed, and now he had to live with that. I don't even remember all the words I said. I was shaking, completely out of control. When I finally stopped, the room went dead silent. Rachel gently led me upstairs to my room. She didn't say much, just sat with me for a long time. And I was grateful, truly grateful, that at least I wasn't alone. I had her. I had Grandpa. And I finally had someone on my side. I still don't know what the future holds, but one thing's for sure, I'm not fighting this war by myself anymore. I've got support. I know now that I'm not wrong for refusing to accept how my dad treated me or how he disrespected everything my mom stood for. I'm not crazy. I'm not the villain. Update 3, final. For anyone who was hoping this would end with some dramatic father-son reconciliation, sorry to disappoint. That's not happening. Not now. Probably not ever. Rachel went through with pressing charges against Aunt Edna. Aunt Edna tried every trick in the book to get her to drop it, but Rachel wouldn't budge. She's stronger than any of us gave her credit for. Grandpa has officially moved in. Dad's got a month to leave. He keeps trying to pull me aside, hoping to say something, fix something, but I won't even entertain the idea. Grandpa is watching everything like a hawk, and Dad seems genuinely afraid of him now. So he's not trying too hard. We've recovered all of Mom's belongings. I've kept everything safe in my room, and once Dad's gone, I'm planning to return her things to their original places. I'll probably seal her room afterward. I don't need the whole house to myself, and it just feels like the right thing to do. A lot of people suggested I try therapy to deal with all this, and I actually brought it up with Grandpa. He's not really into that kind of stuff, but he gave me the money and told me to go ahead if it would help me heal. Rachel's been dropping by almost every day to hang out. We talk. We sit in silence. Sometimes we cry a little. And it feels good. Healing, even. I hate that there was so much distance between us all these years. But now I see she's always had my back. She's helping me find a good therapist, and she says we'll hang out more often now. That means more to me than I can explain. So yeah, this isn't a fairy tale ending. But it's a beginning. Things aren't perfect, but I know they're going to get better. I'm not going to talk to my dad again. Even if he wakes up one day and finally feels sorry, it's too late. The trust is gone. And once trust is broken like that, there's just no putting it back together. Thanks, Reddit. You helped me more than you know.